census has taken an unpredicted turn, as have many events in our lives these days, but we are still have a great deal at stake in our state of North Carolina. The 2020 census is a once in a decade opportunity to participate in the single most democratic process in our country. All people, regardless of color, race, age, sex, family, or citizenship status, can participate and have an equal voice. And it is true, we are overwhelmed with the new and systemic challenges. The COVID-19 pandemic and the nationwide anti-racism protests have presented obstacles to the census participation, but they are rooted in challenges that we knew would be in the path to an accurate count. Racial bias, concerns about safety and security, and inequitable access to resources. These are things that are systemic and that we know continue to prevail. Yet, we must make sure that everyone in North Carolina counts. As we look forward to our new October 31st census deadline, we must revisit these challenges and make changes to adapt to our new obstacles, such as COVID-19. We must adapt to safely connecting with our communities, but we're already proven we can do just that in both high and low tech outreach. We must adapt to the new fears and calm lingering misconceptions about security, reinforcing the safety and the importance of participation. We have a lot to overcome, but 2020 census provides us opportunities to do just that. With 2020 census, we can bring necessary funds back to our cities and towns to support all the resources that go into safe, healthy, and desirable communities. With the 2020 census, we can achieve representation to support our causes and lack of equitable programs and disproportionate impacts of your communities, and so that they can see the need for this accurate 2020 census count. You are the trusted voices who can speak to our people, speak to your communities, who bring comfort through the familiarity, who understand most the challenges your communities face and the challenges that we face as a whole, as a state here in North Carolina. You have direct access to churches, your community centers, your local charities, your local media, your main streets. You have direct access where you can share information in readily accessible ways, ways to help bridge the technology divide and calm the fears in the hard to count populations and the areas that we have those low response rates. I ask each of you to commit to 10 action steps in recognition of 2020 census tagline, 10 minutes will shape the future for the next 10 years. And we can all agree that we need at least 10 years of influence and positive impact for our communities and our lives. If you need additional resources or ideas for your outreach and engagement, I encourage you to visit our website, census.nc.org, for information that can help sign up to the weekly Census Digest and stay connected and informed. These are extraordinary times, but we are capable of extraordinary things. I feel very fortunate to be surrounded by the extraordinary people who make this happen in North Carolina. All of you who will make North Carolina count. I'd like to thank each of you for your hard work and for your commitment and your selfless dedication. I thank you for the opportunity to work among you and, importantly, to shape the future of North Carolina. Thank you all again for being here today. Thank you for caring deeply about this state and the communities across the state. And Stacy, again, thank you for your tremendous leadership as we move forward to make sure that North Carolina counts. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Sanders. People are clapping their hands. It's okay, y'all can clap. This is informal. Spare fingers. Thank you so much for those opening remarks. At this time, it's my pleasure to introduce you all to Brandy Bynum Dawson of the North Carolina Rural Center. Brandy Bynum Dawson is the Director of Advocacy at the NC Rural Center, leading the center's Rural Counts Advocacy Program. She previously worked for 5 years as the Associate Director of Rural Forward NC at the Foundation of Health, Leadership, and Innovation. In this role, she worked with the director and program staff to manage, plan, organize, and direct daily capacity building services of community initiatives in rural North Carolina. Prior to joining Rural Forward NC, she worked at NC Child for over 12 years, where she conducted research and data analysis, led policy campaigns, engaged elected officials, and facilitated numerous community-based projects. Bynum Dawson has been active in the nonprofit community for 2 decades as a professional, volunteer, and a board member. She has facilitated several long-term initiatives across a wide array of subject areas such as education, health, access to mental health and substance abuse services, and delinquency prevention. A native Northeastern North Carolinian, she graduated cum laude from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro, receiving a bachelor's in psychology with a minor in sociology. She holds a master's degree in public administration from NC State University with a concentration in mental health policy. And she is really killing it with working from home with her kids. I'll just add that as well because we talk a lot. So with that, Brandy, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, and good morning, and thank you to also Secretary Sanders for those amazingly welcoming remarks, and I have to follow that, so hopefully I'll do a good job with that. So good morning, and again, I'm Brandy Bynum Dawson, Director of Advocacy at the North Carolina Rural Center. It is such a pleasure to be with all of you today to discuss and strategize about an important issue to each of us and to the great state of North Carolina, the 2020 decennial census. We are thankful for the partnership with the NC Counts Coalition and other stakeholders on this crucial endeavor to get out the count here in North Carolina. For more than 30 years, the North Carolina Rural Center has been dedicated to developing, promoting, and implementing sound economic strategies to improve the quality of life for rural North Carolinians. With that, we serve the state's 80 rural counties with a special focus on individuals with low to moderate incomes and communities with limited resources. We operate with the core belief that our rural communities have inherent cultural value and are vital to the overall economic health of our state. There are significant electoral implications of an accurate census count, as census data is used to redraw district lines and categorize geographically defined membership. Because of our state's geography, accurate representation of rural in our legislative bodies will be a huge impact. What this ultimately means is that census data will determine how many rural legislators will represent our rural communities. This is extremely important in North Carolina, as I've mentioned, where 80 of our counties are rural and where geography and representation matter greatly. An accurate census count helps makes the case for rural community economic development. And in a state, again, where majority of our counties are rural, this matters significantly. We know that rural communities across the state are under-resourced, as Secretary Sanders has addressed, and every dollar that goes to these communities is desperately needed. Yet another vital reason to make sure that every person is counted. There is a shared fate between rural, urban, and suburban communities in North Carolina. And this is demonstrated all too well by the economic impact of an accurate census count. From the foods we buy, the roads we drive on, the schools we send our children to, and the quality of the education they receive, and the jobs we create or retain, all of these things depend on an accurate count. And all of these things transcend party, geographic, and demographic lines. We've known for a while that the population in rural communities has been declining. In essence, what this means is percentage-wise, fewer people call rural North Carolina home. Now, this further heightens both the importance and the critical nature of an accurate count, again, to make sure that every person is counted. For small towns like the one I grew up in Northampton County, with a whopping population of 649 people, every resident must be counted. because an accurate count literally means every dollar and cent that will or will not go to that county. My home county cannot stand to lose any of those dollars. And I'll close by saying it's up to all of us to make sure that in 2020, every person in North Carolina, from Murphy to Manteo, is counted. And I am confident that together we will continue to do everything we can to make sure that happens. We know that what is true about rural is that we are resilient and we will pivot and shift to meet the need. And again, I thank you all for all that you have done this far and all that we'll do in the future to make sure that North Carolina gets counted. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brandy, for all of the work that the Rural Center does. And thank you for your partnership, especially in pulling this together. You got some rave comments in the chat box as well. So I definitely encourage you to check those out. You got some fans there. So with that, we'll push right along with our program. It's my pleasure to turn it over to Ms. Laura McCletty of the U.S. Census Bureau. Hold on, I can't hear you. Let me just get you unmuted. Can you unmute yourself, Ms. McCletty?
Okay.
There you are.
Now, okay. Thank you, Stacy, and your team from the North Carolina Council Coalition for putting this event together. And I'd like to also thank Secretary Sanders for all the work that's been done through the commission for the state. Of course, that was one of the groups that we met with and trained initially once we started the count for 2020. I'd like to also thank my team members. We have a large team in North Carolina. We have 35 supportive, energetic, loyal, committed, creative team members on our team for the State of North Carolina Partnership Program. And I like to say, as the leader of that team, I have found that we have done a lot to get our partners engaged in the census. And we depend heavily on our partners to make sure that they are getting to the communities throughout our community across the state of North Carolina. This, of course, marks my third decennial, and it is by far the most interesting one that I have been engaged in. This is the first time we are utilizing technology for self-response, and of course, COVID-19, which presented its own set of challenges. Nevertheless, we've started at number 37. Now we are number 34. We are slowly moving, but trending in the right direction. And it is due to all of your hard work and collaborative efforts. Today, I'm going to give you a brief update on timelines for our operations and guidelines we will be using to protect the staff and the public as it relates to COVID-19. Excuse me. As many of you may know, the census has been extended to October the 31st. And on June 1st, we resumed our census field operation. We have also completed our update leave operations in North Carolina, and our area census offices are still reaching out to the colleges and the universities with significant off-campus students population to help ensure that they are counted in the right place. A letter went out from our census director, Dr. Stevens Dillingham, to our colleges and university presidents, asking them to provide information for off-campus students, which would allow the Census Bureau to count the students where they would have been staying on April 1st of 2020. The group quarters enumerations, which includes college students, and is now scheduled to begin on July 1st through September the 3rd. Our next operation of focus is non-response follow-up, which was originally scheduled to begin in May, but due to COVID-19, it has now been moved to August 11th through October the 31st. Please encourage people who want to avoid the knock to self-respond now. Additionally, census takers will follow social distancing protocols and all applicable states and local requirements concerning health and safety. I'm not sure if you are aware, but starting in mid-July, the Census Bureau will conduct a soft launch in 6 ACOs to ensure system operations and plans are working correctly. At this time, North Carolina has not been confirmed as one of the areas where they will conduct a soft launch, but the announcement will be made by the end of June. Also, a second wave of soft launching could occur later in July. And I know we are pressed for time today, but if you're interested in updates and timelines, visit the 2020 Census Government website for the latest information. Once again, thank all for all of your adaptability and continued commitment to ensuring North Carolina gets counted. I would be remiss if I did not thank Bob Coates and the other partners that are engaged in our meeting today for assisting us across the state. But just to reiterate the fact that we do have very talented, skilled partnership specialists that are doing analysis and working with the demography department throughout the states, and they're working within their own little groups to make sure that we are continuing to get accurate numbers and to get answers as to why the numbers are not moving. And we feel very confident that we can be number one in our region. So thanks again, Stacy, for you and your staff and the secretary and the governor, and for all of those that are involved across the state of North Carolina in assuring that our count will count and we will make a difference across the state of North Carolina. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. McCletty. And you've got some fans as well in the comments. I encourage you to check it out. And thank you for all the hard work, of course, always of the U.S. Census Bureau. I do have to give a really quick shout out to Elisa Shepard as well, who helped us put this on today and getting all the partnership specialists to be moderators this afternoon for our afternoon session. We had some great quality time together last night to get folks ready for today. So thank you so much to the U.S. Census Bureau for allowing us to be a part of this process and to work with you all. Okay, so with that, I haven't spoken with Bob or Becky to see which one of you will be going first. Is it Bob? Becky? Becky?
It's me.
Okay, Becky, okay. So I'm gonna turn it over to Dr. Rebecca Tippett, who is director of the Carolina Demography. And following Becky, I won't introduce Bob, we'll just go straight into Bob right after Becky. They're kind of like a duo today. And I'll turn it over. So Dr. Tippett, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Stacy. Good morning, everyone. I'm gonna keep this pretty, hopefully short and sweet. Give us some numbers to, sorry, I'm fighting my computer organization right now. Give us some numbers to work from so we know kind of where we are. So I want to really mention here that a lot of this work has been supported through a joint effort with the NC Counts Coalition. So really excited to be able to share this with you and also highlight, I think, some of the impact of the work that you have been doing that is very visible in the response rates. So when we're talking about response rates, I know that we've been talking about census for a while now, but I want to be really clear about what we mean, because some people are saying, well, if we know how many people are responding, then why do we need to do this census at all, right? And so this is not, we don't know who's living in households. So when we're talking about self-response, we are talking about the percent of known housing units in the census mail-out and update leave universe. So this is defined by the addresses that were on the master address file. And these households could be occupied, vacant, or non-existent. So we know that in some of our communities, low self-response may be just because they have a very high percentage of vacation homes. So we do see that happening in some of our eastern and our western communities. This includes response that occurs online, by phone, or by mail, but it is not including any kind of non-household population. So it's not including the group quarters population, such as college students in dorms or residents of nursing homes. It's not including the transitory location enumeration, such as campgrounds or homeless population. And this does not include military or maritime vessels. And it is want to be really clear that this is not the percent of the population that has responded. So when we look at kind of how things are going nationally, this is a chart that the City University of New York has been putting out for a while, weekly and now bi-weekly. And what you can see here is this is looking this thick red line on the very top of the graph that's kind of the highest on the first part. This is cumulative response by day for all 50 states plus DC, and in Puerto Rico. And that top red line was the daily US response rate in 2010. We know operations are different. Not only do we have a global pandemic going on, but we have a very different census in 2020 than we did in 2010. So these are not necessarily apples to apples rates, but this is just to try to kind of have some type of comparison of, are we on track or are we a little bit slow? You can see that overall the 2020 response rate nationally is below where it was in 2010, kind of every day, and we're slowly coming up to 2010 total levels. In some of the states like Alaska, New Mexico, West Virginia, Wyoming at the very bottom, where a lot of the count was done by update leave, the process that was suspended due to COVID and did not restart until May, we see that those rates are much lower and they're coming back up. North Carolina will look at us specifically. We're kind of in the middle below the US average right now, but you can also see that a lot of states, particularly Minnesota, but also Washington, Iowa, Michigan, Wisconsin, are already above where the US self-response rate was in 2010. So some states have been doing really well, are staying really strong. Others, we're seeing kind of the impact of suspended operations really impacting them. Right now, as of yesterday, actually, yesterday afternoon, North Carolina's self-response rate was 57.9%. That's below the national average of 61.6%. We have been slowly closing the gap with the national average, but not at a pace that suggests that we are going to come in alignment with the nation anytime soon. So we really need to see some increased response to get closer to that national average. Right now, we are ranked 34th out of 50 states. I believe the highest ranking that we have held over the response period during our monitoring, which was updated about every week, was 33rd. So this is a better ranking than we started at, but you know, still we're below the national average. You can see that we're still about 7 percentage points below our self-response rate in 2010. And there are 18 states that have a response rate as of today, yesterday, that is above where North Carolina's self-response rate was in 2010. And the reason why we're focusing on self-response is because self-response is the most accurate and cost-effective way of completing the census, and we're going to increase the risk of undercount if we don't continue to get this rate up. So this is that same data just shown in a map. You can see again that much of the South and parts of the West, kind of the, I guess, the Mountain West, have lower response rates, while the Midwest has done very well in terms of responding to their census. So this chart here is the daily response rates to the census by type. So that bright blue is the internet response rate, and the darker blue is mail or phone. So overall, the reason why North Carolina's response has been lagging the nation is because of a lower internet response. We did see that on Census Day. So with all the push around Census Day, we saw a huge increase in self-response. 3.2% of North Carolina households returned their census directly following Census Day. So you can see outreach and engagement can really do a lot to move that needle. We also saw higher mail response in early May, in part because households that were part of the Internet First operation, so they were encouraged to respond online first and did not receive a census form, received their census form in the mail in mid to late April if they had not yet responded. So we see some of those forms begin to roll in, and those kind of spike up response in early May. Starting in late May, virtually all of the response has been by mail or phone. And that we've also seen update leave operations have resumed, so that could be having an impact on that. I do also want to note that the Census Bureau stopped reporting daily response rates as of May 31st, so we now have only Monday through Friday. So you see a big spike, not this most recent weekend, but the weekend before last, so the weekend of June 13th and 14th, we saw a very large increase nationally and in North Carolina, an increase of 0.5 percentage points in terms of how many households had responded. So it was good to see that North Carolina got the same bump that we saw nationally. When we look at kind of who's leading and who's lagging in terms of response rates within the state, we see that the top 5 counties are either kind of the suburbs of Charlotte or the triangle. So we see Orange, Wake, and Chatham are among the top 5. Also Union County leading, and Davie County also up there. All of those counties have response rates above where we were in 2010. Keep in mind though that even our top responding county is still over 2 percentage points below where Minnesota is as a state right now. Our bottom 5 counties are predominantly Western as well as Dare. I do want to note here that there are a lot of factors that could be driving that low response, and we know that for many of these counties, particularly Dare, that vacant housing for vacation homes is doing this, but we also have seen as update leave operations have been resumed, these counties have had a significant increase in self-response over the past few weeks. So we saw just a little bit of an increase in the top 5, but the bottom 5 have all increased by 5% or more over the past few weeks. So keep in mind that those rates are now climbing more for our lower responding counties as operations fully resume. When we look at this on a map, so this is again from CUNY, the hard to count map, and this is kind of at the tract level. You can again see that we're, the West has a concentration of low response, also high concentrations in the Sandhills, the Northeast, and the coast. And there's a lot of factors associated with this. So I pulled out kind of 5 key factors that we're seeing, and these factors mean different things in different communities. So there's no one reason why we're seeing low response rates, and the specific combination of factors is going to influence the appropriate outreach and engagement strategies. One thing that we're seeing particularly important is low internet access. So households without internet at home, where almost 1 in 3 households in our lowest responding tracts did not have internet, compared to just 1 in 9 in our top responding tracts. Similarly, we see really big differences in the proportion of households that were designated update leave, meaning the Bureau was supposed to go hand deliver a packet and update their address, and those operations were suspended for about 2 months due to COVID. Almost 10% of housing units in the bottom 20% of tracts on average were update leave, compared to less than 0.5% in the top 20 in the top responding tracts. We have a higher concentration of bilingual tracts in the lower responding tracts. Like I said, vacant housing is much more common in the lowest responding tracts than it is in the top responding. And another thing that we're seeing here is college communities. So we see a much higher share of enrolled in college population in our low responding tracts compared to the top responding. I want to point out here, these are the averages of tracts in the bottom 20% and the top 20%. And virtually all of these factors have been complicated in some way, shape, or form by COVID. So when we talk about kind of update leave and low internet, if you think back to that census tract map that we showed here, and then you go over here and you look at the contact strategy that was pursued, you can see those purple areas are the areas that tend to have high internet access and were encouraged to respond online first. Those areas tend to be darker blue on the map that I showed you before. So we're seeing a very high relationship between high internet access and high response. And those green areas are internet choice areas where they were initially invited to respond online, but were also given a questionnaire. The yellow areas are also intersect with areas of low response, and those are update leave areas. That operation began again in May, and the Bureau said that it completed it in early June. So we are seeing an increase in response in update leave tracts, where that response rate has increased over 5% over the past few weeks. So it's good to see that we are seeing an impact of resumed operations in the census response. When we talk about college towns, we've been working with NC Counts Coalition and Campus Compact to help them in their outreach and some of the messaging. But what we saw in our initial evaluation in April and May was that when we look at the census tracts immediately around a campus or university, we're generally seeing lower response rates compared to the broader county, which is a concern because due to COVID, these students were generally sent home, but they're still supposed to be counted at their on-campus address. So we know that there's still work going on there, and happy to take questions or kind of help people sort out data as that comes up. So the last question that we wanted to look up is who will be in the non-response follow-up universe in August. I pronounce it NERFA, but I've heard it's actually NERFU. So the NERFU universe in August. So And then how will this have changed? So again, the reason that we really promote self-response is because self-response is the best quality data that we can get. It's also going to prevent individuals from having a Census Bureau worker come knock on their door. And we really, you know, the more households we have to self-respond, the less risk of an undercount that we're going to have. So for what we're doing here is we're looking at the tracts that are in the lowest self-response rate, so the bottom 20%. And remember that this is a group that changes over time. So we can have one group in the 20%, bottom 20% a month ago, and that group will change depending on kind of outreach, engagement, and various community factors over the next month. And then we're using 2018 5-year American Community Survey data to say, okay, well, who's living in those tracts? And I'll show you on the map how those tracts have shifted, and then I'll use an example of race and ethnicity to just highlight how the population living in those places has changed. Because really we want to know is, are historically undercounted groups becoming more concentrated in these tracts? Short answer, yes, they are. So on March 20th, if you look that dark blue tracts, those are our bottom 20% for self-response. And you can see there's a little bit of a pattern in the West, but overall there's no strong geographic pattern. They're really kind of spread across the state. We see them in our urban areas and in our rural areas. They're in Wake and Durham and also in other parts of the state. But as of, actually this map was updated. I forgot to update my slide title. So this is actually as of yesterday. The tracts were much more heavily concentrated. They're really not visible, kind of, there's some in the urban areas, but for the most part, they're in the West, they're in the Sandhills, they're in the Northeast, much more concentrated in our rural communities. So really important to continue to work to get out the count there. And again, this is really complicated in a lot of cases by the lack of broadband, because we've seen that online response is really the dominant mode of response for most of our census and the nation. So when we look at who was living there, we see that overall there are over 2 million residents in those tracts on March 20th, and about 1.3 million white, 338,000 Black, 26,000 American Indian, 44,000 Asian, 46,000 other or multiracial, and 172,000 Hispanic or Latinx. As of yesterday, there are fewer residents living in those tracts overall. Almost, you know, we're only about 1.7 million now, far fewer white residents, but a significant increase in the number of Black, American Indian, and Latinx residents living in the tracts with the lowest response rate, which means that those communities are at increased risk of an undercount now. So when we put that in terms of numbers, we're seeing that overall, the total number of people living in low responding tracts decreased 291,000. We have 291,000 fewer people in the low responding tracts because they're more rural tracts, but the Black population increased by 150,000. The American Indian population living in those tracts more than doubled because we're now more in those communities. And the Latinx population increased by 24,000. So we're seeing an increasing concentration of communities of color in our low responding tracts. So I know that I think we're gonna go straight into Bob now, or Stacy, I don't know if there were questions that came through that you'd like me to answer.
We can go straight into Bob, and then I have a couple of questions that I'll throw out.
Great, and I do want to say that with the support of NC Counts Coalition, we are updating, we're producing PDF county profiles for all 100 counties in the state every 2 weeks right now, as well as an Excel file that you can use to look at the data directly for all tracts in your county. And so if you're interested in that, we have a link there. Thank you.
Thanks, Becky, thank you so much for that information. There was one question about slides, so I will let you all know that we will provide slides afterwards to everyone so that you have that information, as well as this is being recorded and it will be uploaded onto our YouTube page. So with that, we'll throw it over to Bob. And Bob Coates is the governor's census liaison, and he's our vet. And you know, he knows all things census, so we're looking forward.
I don't know about that, but thanks, Stephanie. Thanks, Stacy. Yeah, hi, my name's Bob Coates. I'm the governor's census liaison and the coordinator for the North Carolina State Data Center Network in North Carolina. Laura mentioned that this was her third census. This is my fourth, and far and above, this is the strangest census I've ever been a part of. And that has a lot to do with COVID and a lot of the situations that Becky's underscored, but other challenges that are out there. So let's dive into some numbers. I was in meetings the past 2 weeks with Census headquarters. So, and also with my colleagues from the other states. So that the tagline that was consistent through all these meetings was more is more. The more people who are counted, the louder our voice and the more resources we get. It's just that simple when it comes down to the census. Now, it's understandable that some folks are intimidated or folks can be afraid or even apathetic. But what that means is that if you don't participate because of any of those reasons, your voice, your resources go somewhere else. So we really need to be working on how to get folks to be a part of this once a decade process. So looking at the numbers that came out of last week's meeting, and these are data points as of last week. So at that time, 61.4% of the nation, or about 91 million households, had been counted. And as Becky mentioned, these are households, not individuals. So some of these households might have 10 people living in them. Some of these households might only have one person living there. So we're not talking about the number of people that have been counted, but the number of households that have been counted. Of that, about 80% had been counted using the internet response, about 72.6 million households. The next most popular way to respond was the paper questionnaire. That was 18.7% of the responses, or 17 million households. And the smallest response method was the phone response at 1.3%, or about 1.2 million households. A lot of that has to do with the folks who were using paper, got those paper forms through the internet choice packets that were mailed out to the green areas on the map that Becky showed just a minute ago. We also know that there were folks who either didn't have internet access or chose not to use the internet and waited for that final round of mailing that happened at roughly about the 1st of May. And there were paper forms included on all those non-responding households, provided that those households got their mail delivered to their door and were not part of the update leave operation. And as we've talked about, that update leave operation involves census workers going door to door and hanging packets on those households' doors that got their mail delivered through P.O. Box delivery mainly. And that operation was put on hold due to COVID. So we've had a lag there. That operation, as Laura mentioned, that operation is now complete with the delivery of those materials. There has been a bit of a lag on the processing. Part of that is due to the impact of COVID at some of the processing centers. So we did see a bump at a couple of spaces during the response period. Over the course of one weekend, we saw a 1.5% increase. And as Becky mentioned, we saw a 0.5% increase about 2 weeks ago. Part of that is a processing issue, and we hope to see that improve along with response over time. Nationally, 69,000 group quarters have responded. Now, the group quarters operation is not included in non-response, in the response rate tracking that we see online. These are the college dorms, military barracks, nursing homes. But this 69,000 includes those group quarters that opted for the e-response option or provided an in-paper list to the Census Bureau. There were some group quarters that chose the in-person operation, and that operation was suspended due to COVID. It's going to resume on July 1st and run through September 3rd. Now, before you ask, I know everyone wants to know, did the nursing home in my community get counted? Did my college get counted? The Census Bureau doesn't release that information because it is Title 13. So the best we can tell you right now is nationally 69,000 group quarters have responded as of last week. The update leave operation, Laura mentioned that all those packets in North Carolina have been delivered. That's 164,775 housing units in North Carolina. So we hope that those folks will respond, and as the processing issues catch up with that response, we should see continued improvement in our response. And the service-based enumeration, this is the count of the homeless population. We knew that was a tentative that had been rescheduled due to COVID. Census workers will be visiting soup kitchens, homeless shelters, and making an effort to count the homeless population visible in the streets. That's been rescheduled now to September 22nd through 24th. So for those of you who work locally with your service providing agencies serving the needs of the homeless, be prepared for census outreach and to support that effort in September, because everyone counts, including the homeless population. The takeaway from last week's meeting with census staff from headquarters, their direct quote is, "We are ahead of internal projections on what responses look like." They feel like the non-response follow-up operation beginning in August will take care of the task ahead nationally. Of course, We want North Carolina to go ahead and be and fill out as many of their forms in advance as possible, because as Becky mentioned, that's the most accurate response we get. It's when people respond for themselves. So the North Carolina Complete Count Commission, we started off, you heard Secretary Sanders mention that there's $1,823 per person per year in federal funding at stake for the state of North Carolina. We took a look at the response rates going into at the beginning of June, and we looked at what that potential non-response as of June 1st looked like in terms of at-risk funding to our counties and to our congressional districts. If you go to census.nc.gov, there's a full document there with the tables and a couple of maps that we hope everyone will use to kind of hopefully push response in your local areas. But national, or for the state, as of June 1st, the at-risk due to non-response was $416 million per year. So that's what's at stake for the state of North Carolina. You see the darker counties that have the higher risk. Those also tend to be the areas that have the higher response rates. But the impact of their response rates, since they have more population in those counties, means that there's more folks that haven't been counted, and the funding impact is higher. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that document again at census.nc.gov. Now, I'm not going to pick on Pitt County here, but I did happen to do a presentation to their Complete Count Committee earlier this month. So I happen to have these slides on hand. As we've mentioned, there is a correlation between lack of internet access at home and response, and we're looking at tract level here in Pitt County. However, we also want to point out that the data on lack of internet access at home does not include those folks that have smartphones or cell phone access. So you can use your smartphone to respond. So while the internet access internet access is a contributing factor to response, it's not the only factor that's out there. And we saw that in looking at the stats on people that had responded using the paper questionnaire or phone. Now, one of the things that we did here was that a lot of folks weren't aware that you could respond by phone. So we want to make sure that folks know that there's two challenges before us as stakeholders in the census. Is one, to motivate people to respond, and then connect them to the response method that they feel works best for them. So even if you do have internet access, but you don't want to put personal information out there, that's understandable. You can still use your phone, or you can use that paper questionnaire. So we want to let folks know that they have options and connect them with what they feel is the best option for them. Also, in this era of COVID, we recognize that folks want to make sure that they're keeping their public health safe. So internet is a great way to do that. Toward that end, the governor has made Wi-Fi hotspots available. You may have heard this about a month or two ago. Those hotspots were provided to the local school districts, and the school districts were asked to provide those on buses, and they're mobilely available throughout the school district region. Now, the North Carolina Complete Count Commission can't tell you exactly where the buses are, but we would point you to the broadband map. There's a link there that connects you with your local school district, and you can find out where the buses are or where they're going to be rotating. That's a great resource for folks to go and get information. For instance, the Statistics in School resource for folks who have kids at home right now and are looking at lesson plans, worksheets, even games to educate the kids, and also get that census message across. That's available through online at the Statistics in School site. This site also provides locations for standard publicly available internet access. So these may be in the parking lot of public libraries or by community centers or town halls. So you don't actually have to go inside. You can just get close and connect to the internet, and you can fill out your census quickly. So internet access is available, and we want folks to know that it's a great way to be counted and to be counted safely. And as Laura pointed out, the sooner you fill out your questionnaire, the less likely it is one of those census workers is going to come to your door, and you'll be preserving social distancing. Now, the Census Bureau did announce last week that they've done a couple of special mailings that weren't a part of the original contact plan. The first one of these happened in the middle of this month, in the middle of June. This postcard was sent out to all of the update leave addresses. So remember, these are the addresses that don't receive their mail delivered directly to their door, but deliver it to PO boxes. These are bilingual postcards that let folks know that you can still be counted. This was going out at about the same time the update leave materials were being hung up on the doorknobs. The postcard did not have an internet code on it, but it did refer folks to the 2020 Census website, 2020census.gov, and it also provided the 1-800 number so that they could respond online. This was sent out to 4.5 million post office box delivery addresses nationwide. They said mid-June was when they were going to start this operation, so it should be wrapping up right about now. In terms of actions that we can take locally, we're encouraging folks to do local follow-up and support in the update leave areas. And as a great example of this, I'm spotlighting my friends in Granville County, and it's not because that's where my mother's family is from, but they did call me several times saying that they recognize there were areas of their county that hadn't received any census information, and that's because they were update leave areas. So you see the town of Stovall and up near the Virginia line, those yellow areas, and this is from the hard to count maps from the City University of New York, those areas didn't receive any census information during the prime push on the census because they were update leave. So these folks have now received their materials, and they also received that postcard mailing within the past 2 weeks. Granville County decided that they would do a county-wide mailing, direct mailing, to over 26,000 addresses in their county in the month of June. Now, if we look at the Census Bureau's ACS estimates from last year, the American Community Survey only had 24,069 housing units in the county. So Granville County recognized they had better local information about what was going on with the addresses in their county, and they took direct action to contact their population. In the space of the past 2 weeks, Granville County's response rate has moved from 21st in the state to 16th in the state. So that's an appreciable jump, and it's an example of using direct local follow-up to what the census activities are doing, and also using that local knowledge of finding out what addresses may not have been hit in that original census outreach. So there's no substitute for local knowledge and applying that, and hopefully that's what everybody on this call, your local heroes, you're a part of making the census work. So use that knowledge. Another mailing that was not part of the original operations from the census, but is being done now, is this mailing, another postcard. This is going to about 50 million non-responding households. It's not really NRFU, but the Census Bureau is looking at those addresses on their master address file that they do not have responses from and receive mail directly to their door. This postcard will go to all of those addresses beginning in mid to late July. This postcard is a little different in that it will have an internet response code on the front of the card, whereas the update leave postcard that went out last month did not. This also has the phone number. It is also bilingual in English and in Spanish. So as I mentioned, this is going out in July. There are no additional mailings planned at this time. So we can't count on the Census Bureau to do another direct mailing to non-responding households. It may happen, but they don't have it planned right now. So the ball is really in our court to use our resources and our contact strategies to support these mailings that are going out right now. If we can leverage our outreach with what the Census Bureau is doing, we'll just be adding fuel to that promotional fire. So in this case, where there will be an internet code on the postcard, we can use local follow-up, perhaps with a social media, listserv blast, or other direct phone or other direct access to our non-response areas to hopefully get response up. So in terms of other operations that are going on that we can also kind of piggyback our operations with, the Census Bureau plans a communication rolling regional surge in July. Now, this is not done by the state of North Carolina. This is being done by the Census Bureau communications staff. They will do an analysis at the tract level of response rates. And based on those response rates and the hard to count data that the Census Bureau maintains, the Census Bureau themselves will be making local media contacts. They may be doing local media buys in those areas. We don't know how specific that local will be. If it's Eastern North Carolina, are we talking about buying in markets in those specific counties, or are we talking about doing a regional buy, say out of Greenville or something like that? We just know that the Census Bureau's plan is that in July, they will be making these contacts. So if you are a media outlet in those areas, don't be surprised if you get a contact from the U.S. Census Bureau. We had a little conversation a while ago about college students. Excuse me. So obviously it has been a big concern during the COVID situation because we know many of the college students who would normally have been in their dorms or their apartments near campuses in April were displaced. So the census has moved forward with counting everyone, including those students, but the Census Bureau plans a coverage improvement program beginning essentially now that will be calling and verifying census responses for those households that they think may have counted a college student at home who would probably have been who was counted in the group quarters count from the dorm, or who possibly should be counted somewhere else. I've already had phone calls from people who said, hey, I got a call from the Census Bureau. Is this legit? It could have been part of this coverage improvement program dealing with college students. There's also been a soft launch of the non-response follow-up operation. This has been primarily in college communities and aimed at apartment complexes near the colleges and universities. This is to, number one, make sure that if those folks were in apartments in the spring, did you get your questionnaire, were you counted? And also to find out if you're in college now, or you're getting ready for the next semester, were you here in April? So there are some census workers who are out in the field now. These are, like I said, primarily around the colleges and universities, but don't be surprised if you see the census workers out there. The final thing is a point on confusion. We want to make sure that folks aren't being confused by other census operations that are going on. The American Community Survey samples households every month. That operation tended to involve a mailed out form as well as telephone follow-up. Due to COVID, ACS has been 100% telephone since about March. However, in July, they will resume mailing out paper questionnaires. These will be in a similar sort of envelope as the paper questionnaires that went out with the last round of mailings for 2020. However, they're a different color. They are a legitimate census mailing, but we don't want folks to get confused between the ACS and 2020 census. They're both important. You should complete both, but they're not the same thing. Also, the Census Bureau has been conducting a household pulse survey and a small business pulse survey to gauge the impact of the COVID pandemic on household finances, on mental health, and also on business activity. These surveys are conducted through either email or by phone. They are legitimate surveys. They're not going out to everyone, but if folks do get a call, we want them to know that that is a legitimate survey. So in terms of resources, what are other states doing and what can we do to encourage folks to be counted? The important thing is be counted, make the effort. This is in your interest. There are a number of ways to be counted. If you lost your postcard with a code on it, or if you didn't get a paper questionnaire and you want to be counted, you can always go online to my2020census.gov. Underneath the blank for the code, there's a link that says, if you do not have a census ID, click here. People can click on that link and input their street address and be counted. So if you don't have a code, that doesn't mean you can't be counted. It doesn't mean you have to wait for non-response follow-up. You can still be a part of this. One of the things we also heard is that a lot of folks didn't know that you could call in and provide your information over the phone. So the North Carolina Complete Count Commission has taken the information that the Census Bureau provided and made flyers that are available through census.nc.gov. A lot of the local complete count committees have been using these as drop-ins in things like curbside pickup bags or any event where they're actually able to get folks out to, or in any kind of public racks that folks can visit without interacting with other people. So this also addresses any language barriers that folks may be facing. There are different phone numbers for different language support, so folks can call and answer in any one of these 12 languages, and we hope that that information gets to be shared more. To facilitate response. As we are doing, as everyone has had to shift more towards social media since we've all been quarantined, the communications team at the Complete Count Commission has been developing the digest, the weekly digest that you heard Secretary Sanders mention, but there are also information graphics like this. This quick drop-in graphic can be used on your social media outreach campaign. You can also use it in any kind of articles or direct mailings that you're doing, or listserv post. What this does is it connects folks with those quick ways that you can be counted. There's the online link, there are the phone numbers. So we are attempting to motivate folks and connect them with the way that they feel is easiest for them to respond. Now, if they don't have a paper questionnaire at this point and they really want to use paper, they're going to have to wait for those census workers to come out in non-response follow-up beginning August 11th, because there are no additional mailings of paper questionnaires that are planned at this time. As we're talking to audiences, another thing that we're encouraging local stakeholders to do is make sure you're targeting your comments to the audience that you're speaking to. This is a list of the 3% undercount impact, and this is based on the original outreach, not the June 1st non-response estimates. So this is what's at stake from the very beginning of the census process. We want to make sure that if you're a group that's working with young children, that you see what's at stake there. If you're a veteran, you understand what the census count means to the veteran population in our state. So localize that impact. Be sure to make it, be sure to put a face on it that resembles the folks that you're talking to, and let them know this is what it means to our communities. Here's a quick screen capture of the NC count of the North Carolina Complete Count Commission website. It's census.nc.gov. I'd like to commend the folks from the communication team who've done an awful lot to update this site. You see there's a link there to the online response area. There's also a new outreach toolkit on there with a lot of the resources that we've just talked about. Feel free to grab those and make those your own in any kind of outreach that you're doing. And like everyone, I am working from home. But if you have questions or comments over time, I'd encourage you to use my email address there. I'm checking that all the time. And there's my office phone number, and I'm checking that as often as I can. So thanks for your time. Thanks for all of your energy and your interest in being here today. Thanks, Stephanie, for all the hard work that the NC Counts team are doing. And I will step back and answer any questions that we have time for.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bob. There are some questions in the chat box that I'm sure we could probably provide links to in regards to getting access to some of those materials that you just highlighted. So I will ask if you or Kristen could maybe put in the link there so that folks could have access to the toolkits so that they could get those graphics. As well as we do have 3 questions. I don't know that we'll be able to get through all 3 of them because we still have one more presenter with us today, and we want to make sure we hear about some of the great work happening in Alabama so that they could give us some examples of what's outside of North Carolina. But I'll throw out this first question, and this would either be for Laura, Bob, or Becky. Hello, Stacy. We just found out that a lot of our rural residents receive their mail on P.O. boxes. Here's the question. The U.S. Census Bureau only sends invitations/census forms to addresses recorded in their master address file. How will the U.S. Census Bureau count people that have only P.O. boxes as their mailing addresses? Thank you.
Well, quick answer is that's the update leave operation. So Laura and the census teams from the area census offices have been visiting those addresses, those P.O. box delivery addresses, and hanging resources on doorknobs. My understanding is that packet included the postcard with a code so that they could be counted online, and also phone number information. I'm not sure that paper questionnaires were delivered with those.
That's correct, Bob. Thank you.
All right. The next question is, Bob, can you tell us how they determine the amount of money lost for a non-response per person, and then the total loss or the states calculated from this individual loss?
Okay, quick answer. Back in 2010, the Congressional Budget Office did a study on the economic impact of the census on federal funding. Those formulas were updated for the 2020 census by the George Washington University in a study called Counting for Dollars. So in North Carolina, the federal funding impact as of 2015-2016 was $1,623 per person per year in federal funding. North Carolina funds about $200 per person per year based on census figures. So that's where we got to $1,823. So when we look at non-response, as we've talked about, non-response is talking about the number of households that didn't respond. And then we have census estimates that show the average number of persons per household by county and by community. So we use that figure to look at non-response times the persons per household times the economic impact, and that's where the figures came from.
All right, and Bob, the last question is for you. Is the internet code on the standard edition mailing the same code as households originally received?
My understanding is, yeah, the code ties your individual response to the address that postcard was sent to. And again, if you lost your card or if you're unsure, you can click that I don't have a code link on the website, input your address that you're responding for, and that will tie your response to the right community and the right neighborhood. It's best to use the code if you have it. So if you have a code, use that. But if you don't let that stop you from being counted.
Awesome. Those are all the questions that we have right now. Again, I encourage you, if you have questions as the presenters are going, type them into the chat box. I've seen Becky responding to some questions, as well as some of the partnership specialists. So we'll make sure that we get those answered for you, as well as if you send them to me privately for a specific speaker, I'll make sure that I'll address those to the speakers. So with that, thank you so much, Bob and Becky, for that awesome information, all that great technical information that I definitely cannot ever provide, but I love to hear it. And I think everyone definitely on this call appreciates it, to understand exactly where we are at and where we need to go and what we need to do to get there. So with that, you know, it was really important to us not only to provide you with the state of the census and where North Carolina is, but we also wanted to provide you with an out-of-state example so that we could get some other perspectives, some other ideas in regards to ways to approach outreach within our communities. And so we're really fortunate to be joined today by Carletta Singleton, who is the Alabama Partnership Coordinator, who is going to talk a little bit about the work in Alabama and how they've gotten to their response rate. So with that, Ms. Singleton, I will turn it over to you. Do we see her? Let me make sure she's not muted. Carletta?
Hello.
There you are. We got you.
Okay. All right. Okay. So I want to thank everyone for inviting me to be a part of your conversation and discussion today. And I am enlightened about all of the work that I see that is going on in North Carolina. And thanks to all of the census partners who are working with my colleague, Laura McCletty, to increase the response rates and get a complete and accurate census in North Carolina. So what's happening in Alabama? Currently, our response rate is at 59.4%. So we're just a little behind, lower than the national average of 60%, or a little over 60% or 61%. And so what has sparked that? We have a very active and engaged state complete count committee. And around the state, we have more than 2,000 census partners that are engaged at some level of activity, are encouraging and educating Alabama residents about the participation in the 2020 census and how important it is, and it impacts all of our essential services across the state, as well as our representation in Congress, redrawing of districting line, and all the funding and federal funding. And even at our level, there are state funds that our census numbers are based on to allocate funding, state funding, to the counties across the state. And we have 67 counties. Most of the state is rural. We have probably 4 major urban areas, and that includes Birmingham being the largest, Birmingham, Alabama, Montgomery, the state capital, Mobile, and then Huntsville. So for the most part, the State Complete Count Committee since 2018 in the fall in September has been very active and very engaged. They hired consultants early on to put their action plan together. And then the governor's office and the governor went to the state legislature and said, we need some skin in this game. We need the effort from the local legislators to get involved. And they asked for funding to help support the 2020 census effort. And with that, they were able to get the state legislature to invest $1 million into this effort. So that $1 million included a portion of the funds going towards grants to local governments, community organizations, nonprofits across the state. So there were like 34 organizations that were funded. It also includes some of our junior college and our junior college system across the state. So every junior college has been part of the effort, and those are locations where the public and residents can go to use computers to fill out their questionnaire, if we needed training space, if we need assistance with printing and providing additional materials. The junior college system has been very supportive. Also with that, the Agency for Children, Alabama Children, has been very, very helpful. They were also a grantee, a portion of that $1 million that went to local grants. So they have been very effort. So in all, it's taken a collaborative effort. We have a number of statewide organizations that were funded, that their work is supported statewide. It's not localized. Some of the local governments receive funding through that $1 million, but they're concentrated on their local areas. Some of our regional council of governments receive funding so they can cover more than 12 counties or 14 counties, whatever their geographic area is. So that's been very helpful. And the other way that the State Complete Count Committee really helped even their grantees and some of the local governments is they hired an advertising firm. So the advertising firm was able to put together a sort of supportive materials, press releases, promotional items. They did all the design work and provided templates, just as the Census Bureau did with some of the 2020 census materials that's on the 2020census.gov website. But they localized those materials and put Alabama tags on it and put those resources on the internet and the website for Alabama Counts. So, and that was very, very, very instrumental and very good, because some of the local areas, they had, even with those grants, they had to put up 50% match. So whatever they requested in those grants, whatever they funded, they had to have skin in the game. So 50% of local funds had to fund and match those grants coming from the state. And with that, they've been very using grants for outreach materials, for printing materials, and providing those collateral materials to their constituents, and to provide materials and outreach and education to residents across the state. So that's been very, very helpful. And then our Census Partnership Program, we have about 30 partnership specialists across the state. And one area that we were really concerned about early on is what we call the Black Belt. And it is a collection of about 14 to 19 counties that stretches across the midsection of the state. And that is the part of the state that is a number of counties geographically centered, low minority, impoverished, low income, high poverty level areas. And we know we needed to focus on that area. And so we hired partnership specialists from those geographic areas, from those counties, so that we can concentrate that effort. That way, the residents and the elected officials and others, businesses, they had residents right in their community that they can look to for information about the census, and they can be motivated. And if they had questions, if they felt uneasy about providing census data, then they had someone to go to. One of the organizations that's been most helpful, I think, through this process in the Black Belt is this organization that was funded through the state grants called the Community Black Belt Foundation. And they have gone door to door, knocking on doors. They've put out flyers. And what they've done is really create what we have at the Census national level is like their own call center. People, they put out flyers, put out the number for their office that people can call, local number, people that work in their communities. You can call them and get questions answered that you may have, whether it's about what happens with the data, why do they ask this question. They were there locally to answer all of those questions and to get that information out to their residents. And at the same time, if in those areas, we know that, internet access is almost non-existent, very, very low. So they were able to provide that connection. If people wanted to call in and have their workers online to complete that questionnaire, just giving them the information over the phone, then that's what happened. And I think the last number that I got, they were already upwards of over 1,000 to 1,200 people that they had helped in terms of the number of households that had helped. They had helped complete the questionnaire, and they're still going. So their effort in the Black Belt has been very instrumental, very, very instrumental. I cannot say how much work and where our efforts would have needed in terms of the resources. We would have needed almost double the resources that we have partnership specialists in that Black Belt area without the support of the Community Black Belt Foundation. So having Census partners that are very engaged, having Census partners that are committed. They make the commitment. And then having Census partners that has the resources. And you got to have resources, you got to have the financial backing, and you got to have the commitment to put labor and people behind the effort and behind the commitment. So we have that. And it includes elected officials. So not only are they people hearing from the census workers that live in those counties, but they're also hearing from their local elected officials who are also engaging and encouraging them to complete the questionnaire and to help them understand what it means for their local counties, what it means for their small towns and cities, so that they have access to federal funds. So that's been very helpful. And then the other part is, just as we have an active state complete count committee that put the resources, the financial investment in place, they also designated the one department of government at the state level as the census liaison, a staff of about 3 or 4 people internally, but also all state departments were asked by the governor to have a role. What will be their commitment to invest in getting the education and motivation out? One of the strategic efforts, and we saw this even in 2010, this is my second decennial, the Alabama Department of Transportation and the highway signs, variable message signs, they put a message on March 13th, when the online tracking went live, they put the message on the variable message signs across the interstate throughout the state and just encouraging the people to complete your 2020 census. Straight message, I mean, couldn't get any simpler than that, a call to action, and they put that message out there, and it's still out there today, even in the midst of COVID, having to deal with that in the background, but that message is interchanging between COVID message and also the message to call action to complete the census. So that's been very helpful. And then we've had local organizations and some governments that have also paid for and bought billboards around the states and put that message out as well. We have at least, I would say, about 150 or so complete count committees in those counties, in those regional council of governments that are very active, 2 of which that started their effort in 2018. They didn't wait until January of 2020. They started very early getting that message out, educating, putting their plan together, and they have worked their plan superbly. They've been very instrumental, and with that, it's created some competition across the state with some of the nearby counties and cities and towns who looked at what other areas and counties have done, and they've been successful. So they've been tagging in on some of the action strategies and some of the things that they've been doing. So the city of Birmingham hired their consultant. A lot of the other complete count committees, maybe they didn't hire consultants, but they knew where to go to make their resources count. They put a budget in place. Most of our local governments put some monies in place, like I said, whether they were recipients of the state grants and they had to put up to 55%, but others maybe didn't even receive the grants, but they still allocated funds from their local budgets to devote it to census. So that has gone a long ways in the state and helped our response rates be as high. So I think it's been a collaborative effort. One of the things that we are seeing now is with COVID, there were some plans that weren't able to be implemented, and the local governments have called and they kind of gotten together with their committees and with their governments and elected officials, and they've kind of hit the restart button. So they're doing what we call census action days, where they particularly take a particular area, focus on those areas right now where the response rates are the lowest, and do some type of activity in those census tract areas. The food giveaways, even the COVID-19 testing sites, they're going out, passing out materials, census materials. We have a group that's out right now as I speak here in Birmingham. And they're passing out census material. And even as people are lining up to get maybe food giveaways or get tested, they're standing 6 feet with social distancing, but they're asking people to go ahead and complete that questionnaire while they wait. And we've watched some of those giveaways happen in certain census tracts, and we've seen the rates go up in those census tracts. So we are really localizing our outreach effort right now so that we get down to those neighborhoods and communities where the census rate is the lowest. So those are some of the unique things I think has happened in Alabama, but it's across the state. It has taken a joint effort at the state level with our local governments, with some of our community organizations, our foundations across the state, and it's also taken even the commitment of just local everyday people. They get behind, they see the need, they understand it, but maybe their neighbor don't. So they become those trusted voices that we often talk about in census and partnership outreach. They become those local voices, and they are galvanizing people across the state to complete the questionnaire.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ms. Singleton, for those remarks. I think that was extremely helpful, especially as we lead into our next section, just to hear some of the things that are happening in Alabama. We did have a couple of questions. One probably being the most obvious is, and I guess I'll probably throw this to Bob, who could probably expand on it a little bit more. But of course, Ms. Carletta talked a lot about the state's investment in the census and being able to provide some type of financial backing. And so one of the attendees did ask, what is the state funding for North Carolina for census? So I'll throw that to you, Bob.
It is zero. We have asked for 2 budget cycles for census funding in the same amount that we used in 2010, which is $1.5 million. And both requests were denied by the General Assembly. So there is no official state census budget for the 2020 census. And if you want to contact your local legislator and ask them why, that might be a good question right now.
That's a great question that you could ask them, as well as we do have a sign-on letter, and NC Council has been working with the Rural Center to see if we could get something in the next budget, you know, no matter how small, to support some of the efforts across the state. So if you're interested in that initiative, you could contact me offline, or you could contact Brandy offline, and we could talk a little bit more about how we're going about that process, because I do think it's incredibly important to know that you know, investment is really important, especially when we're talking about trusted messengers and making sure that they're able to do the work on the ground. And so that's a really big component. And I think that Ms. Singleton, you know, really illustrated that with some of the partnership and the work that's happening between the state, but also looking, you know, for that half investment on those grants with other local governments. So thank you so much for sharing that information. Before we go into our breakouts, I will highlight a few of the outreach activities that NC Counts Coalition is either implementing right now or has been implemented. And I hope that once you go into your breakout groups, you'll be able to talk to some of our partners a little bit more about this. We just finished our NC Counts, or My Black Counts NC Week of Action, which was last week, where we were counting our community as we counted down to Juneteenth. And so a lot of our partners, APRI, we partnered with them to do food distributions across the state and to provide census information. A Better Chance did some virtual events, as well as a caravan. Durham Counts, as well as NC Counts and Wake County's Complete Count Committee, we did some caravans as well. So that was last week. This week is actually, we have 2 weeks of action that are taking place. One is nationally LGBTQ Week of Action, and Ames is actually on the phone call with us from Equality NC, which is heading that up from the statewide perspective for North Carolina, as well as we have Todos Contamos NC, which is our Latinx-based week of action, which is also this week. And we'll send out an email. It went out to our nonprofit partners yesterday, but we'll send it out to our general listserv about ways that you can engage and uplift the voices of those communities to encourage census participation, as well as we do have our partners from Amexcon, Naleo, and El Pueblo all on the line, and they'll be in some of these workout groups as well, and they could talk a little bit more about some of their work. The week of the 6th through the 11th will be our outreach week for young children, which will be led by NC Child. And so we'll be working with organizations that work with young children to make sure that young children are counted for the census. And then July 13th through the 18th will be API, so Asian American Pacific Islander. That will be led by North Carolina Asian Americans Together as another statewide initiative to count that committee, or to count that population, I'm sorry. In addition to that, I will add that we kind of had to, of course, NC Counts is, we've probably funded close to $500,000 of nonprofit organizations that they're able to do this outreach work. And we do have one final round of grants that will be opening in the next couple of weeks. I don't have an exact date because we're trying to determine how we're going to distribute those funds. Most likely it will be very specific, saying that, you have to reach you have to be doing target outreach to a census tract that's performing at a certain rate or lower, so that we could really narrow in on these hard to count communities and making sure that folks get counted. But that will be opening in the next couple of weeks. And as of right now, I can tell you it's at least 100,000. It will probably be a little bit more. And for that round of granting, a reminder that it's only open to 501c3 nonprofit organizations or community-based organizations. However, they can have a fiscal sponsor. And second is we do encourage organizations that currently work with complete count committees to apply for that funding, because we're really big on coordinating efforts. We don't want people working in silos. We really want folks to leverage what's already happening within the community and to work together. And we have seen that, be pretty successful with a lot of our grant partners currently. Perfect example is Greensboro, where East Greensboro now is one of our grant recipients, and they sit on the Complete Count Committee, and they're able to coordinate those efforts to actually expand the impact and the capacity. So look out for that as well. Also, one of the things that we have been able to provide some of our partners with, if you are doing food distributions, a lot of folks have just been asking for t-shirts, just have say census on it so that the message gets out there as well. So if you are in need of t-shirts, I will say contact us sooner than later, because we're about to put in our final promo item request for the census cycle. And other than that, you'll hear about some other activities that are going on through the work of some of our partners. Again, it's about 150 nonprofit organizations who have just done, I can't even tell you how incredible of a job they've done with this pivot, moving very quickly from door-to-door canvassing to digital and online work. From our perspective as grantors, we said, hey, we understand there's a little bit of a shift. If you need to, kind of take some time off to figure out what you're going to do, we understand, but nobody stopped. Everyone was like, no, we're pushing forward, and we're going to make sure that this work gets done. So definitely want to uplift the work of all of our trusted messengers who are also Census Bureau partners and NC Counts Coalition partners. So with that, I am going to ask that you guys be very patient with us as we go into our breakout rooms. So we pre-assigned everyone based off of the email that you signed up with. So most folks, if you registered by about 8 o'clock last night, when we go into breakout rooms, you should automatically be placed into a breakout room. If you did not sign up by 8 o'clock, if you registered like between 8 and whatever time it is now, then we ask that you be patient, because we're going to have to manually place you into a breakout room. Also, we really tried extremely hard, Beatrice, Elisa, Darrell, and myself, to get you into a breakout session where the demographics are somewhat similar, or you're within a region, that you're working in. However, because we had so many attendees, we weren't as successful as we hoped we would be. But regardless, I know you're going to have some really great conversation. All of the partnership specialists, thank you so much to all of the partnership specialists who are on today's call, who have volunteered to facilitate, as well as to some of our folks from local counties who offered to share some of their best practices. So again, I really hope that this is helpful in providing you with some insight on what's happening across the state. I hope that, you know, if you work with government and maybe because of the pivot, you haven't had a chance to be as robust in your outreach, I hope that there's a nonprofit within your group that's doing a lot of work, and the two of you could link up and you could see how you could leverage that partnership and work together. So with that, Beatrice, I'm gonna let you place us into our rooms. There is going to be a pop-up. It's going to say go into breakout room. It's going to look like it disconnects you, but it's not disconnecting you. And it'll take about 10 to 15 seconds. And then you will automatically be placed into your breakout room. And then we'll reconvene. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, guys, I'm opening up the breakout room. It should put you in there automatically, but if it doesn't, it's okay. Like Stacy said, we're going to put everybody else that's left over in the breakout rooms manually.
Okay.
Wait, not yet, Stacey. I'm gonna give it a couple of seconds because it's still people.
Okay, I was gonna say it looks like most people.
Yeah, but I'm still seeing names that I know I put in the room.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
That seems about right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do we have any partnership specialists on? Keela, you are.
Yeah, it didn't move me.
Okay, let's see.
Now, what is it? Keela.
Keela.
Name system is Carolina. Let me see.
And Demario, I think you're going into Wake County. Let me see if I could.
Demario wasn't a part of the sheet. Okay.
Yeah, Demario goes into Metro.
Metro. Move Demario though. I don't see his name. Oh, there we go. Into Metro. Okay.
Are there any other partnership specialists on this that's left back? Is everybody else just an attendee? Okay, so that's good. So we have all of the facilitators gone. So everybody else, we will just have to randomly assign.
Yeah. So how do you want to do this?
I say we just do one. It's not letting me help you though.
It's not. Okay. Harold PS not in room. So a lot of these rooms don't have a lot of people in them.
I would, yeah, so I would just, because we didn't have the full 200.
Yeah, so I'll just start putting people in where they're needed the most.
That sounds good.
So Mid Carolina, I'm gonna send about 7 or 8 of you guys over there. There's only 3 of them.
And I just got a text, Priscilla Dingle. I don't know if you can move her. I'm gonna tell her to come back into the main room.
I can move her.
Okay, she's in Mid Carolina, but she needs to be in East.
She needs to be in Eastern or Northeast?
I think just Eastern.
Okay. All right, so let me see. Western needs a couple more people. Triangle. You know, triangle was such a large list, but a lot of them aren't there.
You need to put Henrietta into Metro.
Can I put Henrietta into Metro?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know where she is now?
She's in this general.
Henrietta is in Metro. Corsley. Henrietta Corsley?
Yeah.
Yeah, I put her in Metro.
Okay, great. And it looks like you've got most votes on.
Yeah. DeMario keeps coming back into the main room. Where is he supposed to go?
He's supposed to be in Metro.
Metro? Okay. In the back. Let's see, who else needs the triad? All right, everybody, please sign.
Good job.
Yeah.
I don't know why it wouldn't let me help you.
I don't know neither, but something in me just knew someone right. Like, you know, like it's all going so well, and I'm just like, nah, something not right. I checked the breakout room list, and I saw that everybody was not, well, not everybody, but a good amount of people was not assigned. I'm like, I'm seeing names that we went through last night. I'm not too sure how they could have entered. Darrell was also in that list, so I want to ask Darrell how he entered. But
hey, Kristen just sent me, I'm gonna tell her to go ahead and get started because everyone's in.
oh, let me send that message, a broadcast message.
Oh yeah, that they could start.
Yeah. Alice, I feel like I know you. You should be somewhere. Alice Wilson should be in East Bend. Oh, okay. She must have went back.
I really wish that I could like pop in
the rooms. Why can't you?
I don't know. I'm co-host, but I don't think it will let me. Yeah, it won't even let me assign myself to a room. Let me pop.
Well, I can move you around.